Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the shop. So I think we're ready to start the car today. The heater box is in, all the plumbing has been done, all the electrical has been done for the heater box. You'll notice over here I have installed a starter switch, and really all it is a push button that is coming from the positive terminal, and I'm going to the first pin on the solenoid. This, if I press it, will engage the starter. Now, the other thing you want to check for, of course, is that you have voltage at the coil. So what I did is I turned the ignition key on and I used my multimeter, and yes, I have 12.7 volts at the coil. As I said, I've got a button bypass, so I'll be able to start it while I'm under the hood because I want to be able to see it cranking when I'm pressing the button. I'm going to obviously have to introduce fuel into the carburetor manually until fuel comes from the fuel pump, because that's going to, it's never been run, so everything's dry. So I've got a lot of things to get ready, but I think it's time to start the car. Check the heater now, make sure the heater is giving off hot air, because what you want to do is bleed the whole system. You want to make sure that you can get the hot water into the cab so all the air is out of the system. So good. There's hot air in the cab. The valve is open. I don't see any overflow yet out of the radiator. Temperature is halfway. It's between cold and hot, so that's good. Oil pressure is at about 60%, which means instead of being at half, it's a little bit towards the high, which is about right considering I'm running it at 1800 RPM right now. And now we just let it run. Hopefully it's starting to race up. Now I'm going to have to drop it a bit. loosening up as it's breaking in. The slowly starts to climb up on it. In this case here now, I've already dropped it down once, so that should be okay. And again, like I said, I double checked the timing. I'm at about 22 degrees, which I think is good for a break-in. You don't want too far advanced. You don't want to put any pressure on anything. I'd rather have a late spark than an early spark. So that's, like I said, 22 degrees at 1800 RPM. Normally this would be in the, getting close to 28. But in this case here, I'll just leave it the way it is and let it run. And hopefully she doesn't overheat. We can let it run for the break-in period. So we can see the oil pressure. I think that's fantastic. We got good oil pressure in the engine. Temperature is less than half and it's idling there, so it's been running for a while now at less than half, so that's perfect. Like I said, I'm running at about, looks like about 16 to 1700 RPM. So the RPMs are good the way I like it. Let's take a listen to the exhaust. I think that sounds pretty sweet. Like I said, so we've got the whole thing running. There's a lot of smoke, but that's because the exhaust system is a mess, right? Because this exhaust system is sitting for 2 years. And I think, oh, we're starting to creep again. We're getting up to 1800, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit more and we'll keep going. Well, sorry, it looks like my camera shut down when I was first starting the car, so you missed the initial start. What I had done is I had lifted up the fuel where the fuel goes in, and I filled the fuel bowls, and that way there the car can start and run on the fuel bowls until the fuel pump was able to bring fuel and get the filter and into the carburetor. So I didn't have to squeeze fuel down the carburetor for that. The only problem I have right now is this is the original fuel pump and it's leaking. Around the seal, it's not leaking around where I attached it. So I guess I gotta get a new fuel pump. I assumed I should have been able to, I should have just changed it, but remember that discretionary spend I talked about? I mean, when do you stop buying new parts and hope that the old parts still work? But fuel pump, here comes one of those I gotta order. So like I said, we're about 10 minutes into the run and it's running great. So I gotta keep it going. Alright, we're about 20 minutes of running. It sounds great. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull the dipstick out even though the engine's running. I'm not checking the oil level. What I'm doing is I continually check to make sure there's nothing contaminating the oil. So if water got into the oil, it would start to turn milky. So as long as the oil is still clean and clear, then I'm good. Go. I shut it down about 32 minutes into the run. The fuel pump leak seemed to be getting a little bit worse, and the last thing you want is fuel around a hot engine. So I made the decision to shut the engine down. Now that break-in period should have been good enough. What I am going to do though is unfortunately have to order a new fuel pump. I had already tested a few things on this car. I guess I didn't test the fuel pump. It wasn't leaking when I took it apart, so I don't know why it's leaking now. But basically, I made sure that things like the power steering pump was not going to leak when I started the car, and this is how I did it. Now, there are a couple of things that I've got to get done before I start this motor, and one of the things I wanted to test is the power steering. Now the reason I want to do that is because if something goes wrong with the power steering pump or the fittings or anything like that while the engine has started, you don't want to shut the engine off, especially during break-in. When you initially start these cars, you really need them to break in for that 15 or 20 minutes. And what you want to do is you don't want to shut the engine off for any reason other than something catastrophic. So how do we test that we've done a rebuild on the power steering pump, right? So I've replaced all the seals. I took the power steering pump apart, replaced all the seals. Obviously new hoses, new fittings, new everything. So how do we test that? Well, they made it easy for you. What you do is you get a 3/8 inch Allen wrench socket. And of course, then you can use any drill you want. And of course, this is just a 3/8 socket on this. But the idea is now is I can take this and I can drive the pump. This goes right in the front of it. These were made to fit inside. They do perfectly. It fits right inside the pump. Now we can start the pump. And as you can hear the RPMs dropping, that's because what's happening here is that that's pumping. And what I did is I put a new piece of cardboard down, and the new piece of cardboard now allows me to take a look and see whether or not there's any drips. Now I've already tested this, because initially when I did this exact same test a few minutes ago, I had some leaks, and I went underneath and I took my wrench and I tightened up the fittings that were leaking, and I was able to do that test. But there's something else you can do while you're doing this test, and that is I can run the pump, and then as I'm running the pump, I can try to turn, well, first off, let's try to turn the steering knuckle itself. So I'm just using my hands here, and that's very difficult to turn. I can't really turn it, but let's power it up. And now I can turn the steering shaft with my fingers. So I can now use my fingers and simply rotate the steering shaft when the pump is running. So I know I have an end-to-end system. The power steering's working. This is one less thing that can cause me a problem when I do the initial start. So like I said, very easy way to test these things without having to worry about the engine running and getting in your way. 3/8 Allen, that's all you need. Well, I guess who's ready for a ride? Let me just place this phone right here. Of course, the steering wheel is not connected, but what the heck? Clutch in, first gear. It moves. Brakes, reverse. All the temperatures and everything seem okay. It goes from first and reverse, no problem at all. Not going to overdo it. Let's put her back in, make sure everything's good before we even think of driving it a little further. Brakes feel solid. Everything seems fantastic. You know what? It's a good day. I'm going to shut her down. Well, thank you for joining me. That was a turning point. The car is moving under its own power. I'm able to drive forward. I'm able to throw in reverse. There was no grinding on the gears. It slid in beautifully. So the clutch is obviously working, and we had to go through a lot of machinations on that clutch, didn't we? But basically now the car is mechanically complete. What I have to turn my attention to, of course, is body. But one of the things I didn't expect to happen is the fuel pump leaking the way it is. And I'm going to assume it's because the diaphragm dried out. And what happened is by sitting on the shelf for a couple of years, the diaphragm dries out, the pump starts to pump, it cracks the diaphragm, fuel gets around the diaphragm into the housing, and it leaks out of the housing. It wasn't leaking out of the fittings, I made sure of that. It was leaking out of the housing. So I guess, like I said, so a new fuel pump on its way. But I wasn't expecting that. But I thought something might happen. I mean, you have to be prepared. And just so you know, I was prepared, right? I had a fully charged fire extinguisher on hand, ready to go just in case. But basically, we are at a position now where the next really thing to do is well, I can work on the windows, absolutely, that'll be a side project. But the main project really will be bodywork. We'll be starting to sand the vehicle, flatten it out, clean it all up, and prepare it for paint. But I'm a little concerned about my painting skills, as of yet. So I thought I'm going to take on a small project, something that I can use the same primer, I can use the same base coat, I'm going to use the same clear coat, so it's going to look just like the car. And in fact, I'm going to try something. I bought the C-stripes for this car, but I'm wondering, wouldn't it be cool if I could paint the car white along the side, then wait for that to dry up, apply the C-stripe to that, and then apply the base coat. And then once the base coat is done, peel the C-stripe away, which would then reveal the white paint, and then clear over the whole thing. And then all I got to do is wet sand the clear in order to flatten it out, so you'll have a nice flat surface between the blue and the white. So how do I, prepare myself to do that? Well, you take on a smaller project that if you learn and you make a mistake or two, but you get better by it, but it doesn't really matter, then that's probably the best thing to do. So you know what? Let me introduce you to that, but let's do that in the next video. So if you liked this video, hit that like button. Again, thank you for joining me from the shop, and I'll see you later.